With problems as well. A leading expert on national security is with us this morning. James Carafano is from the Heritage Foundation in Washington, D.C. Jim, thanks for being here.
It's great to be with you.
Now that thousands of civilians are fleeing into Europe, fleeing ISIS from Iraq and Syria, does that change the U.S.'s military options or what it might do?
No. I mean, the problem here is really kind of a European problem, and this is the big problem from this is maybe the biggest flood of refugees since the end of World War II. Now, you put it in perspective. I mean, the displaced population in World War II, that was a massive, unbelievably unprecedented problem. You know, on the other hand, the Europeans kind of recovered from that. So this isn't an apocalypse. It's not the end of the world, but it's a big problem. And here's the irony: it's going to get worse. And the reason why it's going to get worse is because of the Iran deal. So ironically, the Europeans,
the Iran nuclear deal.
Yeah, the Europeans are some of the greatest champions. We love the Iran deal. We think this is a great idea. But the Iran deal gives Iran about $150 billion. We know what they're going to use that money for. They're going to further destabilize the region. There's going to be more violence. There's going to be more oppression. There's going to be more economic disruption. What's that going to mean? It's going to mean a lot more refugees. And where are they going to go? They're going to go to Europe. So in many ways, the Europeans chanting for the Iran deal, that's kind of like geopolitical suicide.
Considering the U.S.'s involvement since the creation of Israel after World War II, does the U.S. have any obligation to accept thousands of these refugees?
Well, the United States takes in more refugees than the rest of the world combined.
50%, I think I read not too long ago, of what the UN has. Is that right? And
we will probably continue to do that. And quite honestly, we're a large country. We're 330 million people. We got room for a lot more. A lot of refugees are a humanitarian thing. I'm proud as an American that we do that, and we're okay with that. And we can talk about the security concerns and the economic impact and everything. But at the end of the day, refugees are still relatively a minor problem, and I don't think we're going to take in numbers anywhere near the Europeans. I mean, logistically, that doesn't make sense. And we got to not lose the whole thing is what you want is the answer is not to have people be refugees to begin with. So that means you need some degree of public safety, political stability, and economic stability. And until we have the policies out of the United States and the Europeans that are really helping build that in the Middle East, we're just going to get more of the same.
You wrote recently that a powerful way to damage the influence of ISIS is to take out the social media channels and their online presence as well. That seems relatively simple to do.
Well, what makes ISIS terrible is not that they're online, per se, right? Katy Perry's online. Katy Perry has like 70 million Twitter followers. But if Katy Perry tomorrow said, tweeted out and said, go kill your parents, nobody's going to do that, right? That's because that's a social network, right? That's not a human network. What makes these guys dangerous is when you link an online network with living people in a human network on the ground. So there are people on the ground that are willing to operationalize that, and you link that with the social network. That's when the dynamics get kind of scary. So when you have, for example, these large populations in Western Europe of disaffected people who are linked into the social network and are receptive to that message and can go out and recruit and get together and do this, that's when you really
that's where the problem is.
So these worlds are linked. The online world and the real world is linked. As long as ISIS has a state, and as long as they're growing and they're getting more powerful, they're not just an online threat, they're a huge physical threat. That's right with Iran, the big problem.
Two last questions. Do you foresee U.S. troops returning to Iraq or going into Syria to fight ISIS?
Well, it depends,
ground troops.
Depends on what you want. I think an ISIS state has two problems. One is an ISIS state is completely intolerable in the sense that sooner or later it's going to result in a regional war. I mean, you've got a Sunni terrorist state smack between the Sunnis and the Shias. That's just, and then the other thing is that is going to be a base for global Islamist insurgency and terrorism. So that's intolerable. So if you want to break the back of ISIS, you have to break their territorial control in Iraq, and that's going to require troops. And I look around the world, and who's got the only capacity to really do that? And I kind of look back at us. So in my mind, that may be the biggest and toughest call for the next president of the United States.
Final moments here, too. You spent a quarter of a century in the military, cybersecurity expert, terrorism expert. What keeps you up at night? What fear keeps you up, Jim?
Us, I look at Washington, and I look at how we're dealing with these issues, and that's what really concerns me. I think, look, this is not a partisan comment, but 8 years of foreign policy, is there any part of the world where we're better off than we were 8 years ago? And the answer is no.
Good to have you here. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.